Boy Scout.
So we think the people out there in Zoom land can see me, but we're not sure. So
Tell them to speak up.
I'm gonna
raise a hand.
No,
Yeah,
no,
we
there's-
can see you. We can see you just fine.
So I'm gonna have to trust you people out there in Zoom land to mute yourselves because we're in a different room and we don't know if we can do that. So as you guys may have got the memo, they called me yesterday afternoon and said, hey, you guys can't have your meeting because we have a Shrove Tuesday event. And I said, well, the newsletter's already gone out. I can't stop that. And plus John already took a day off from work, so he's got to be here. So we are in a different room. For those of you that are far away that have never been here, that may not mean too much to you, but here we are. I'm Dave Schaff, Vice President. Andy's over there running the computer because somebody's got to do it. We have stragglers coming in.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Look at the screen. Yeah. There's a message. They say the sound quality is bad, but this is, there's no mic, there's no like microphone.
The sound
to get
quality may
close
not be
to.
the greatest because we seem to be using built-in in the building here. We're in a room that's kind of wired with a screen over here and the mics are here. So we're not using much of our own equipment except for our laptop computer.
It's not bad. And it seems to be zooming in on you.
Yeah,
It
and
seems to be zooming or rotating the camera.
you're plenty loud. You're
Yeah.
plenty loud.
Talking about that.
I don't know if we have one volume
Tell them
control.
to cover their camera lens.
1984.
We just want them to shut their mics off.
Because then it will get a little sleepy there and just cover up his.
Do we have anybody that's here in the house that's first time, either a member or a visitor? Oh, okay. Well, come on up here. Well, you can just stand here. The camera's back there. So, okay. So this is Damon. He got dragged along with John. So thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You know, you're a guinea pig like I am. Okay. I was gonna say, coming up soon, before I get into the other stuff, do we have current events from Chip?
Yes.
Come on up here and tell us some stuff. Stand right here and we think the camera's quality is any better. It's the spy eye in the sky.
Hello, Spy.
Yeah.
Anyways, good news down there at Canyon City. The Canyon City Royal Gorge purchased a private car called the Sierra Hotel. It's a dome lounge sleeper, built in 1948, CB&Q, originally known as the Silver Lounge. The car was purchased and moved to Colorado in October 2021. Has not been used until just last week, when they finally put it on the train and took it all the way through the Royal Gorge to Parkdale. Private party, enjoyed the ride, everything worked fine. So there's something new in the Royal Gorge. And meanwhile, over here in Hudson, Colorado, BNSF has started an intermodal service out of their Hudson Logistics Park. Eventually, they're going to have a larger intermodal facility, which might replace Renix, which is kind of hemmed in. Something about development nowadays. Anyways, if you see a BNSF intermodal train going down the joint line, it's going to Long Beach, California. We evidently stole some business off the Union Pacific.
That's about once a week right now.
Yes, correct. So you never know what's gonna happen. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Chip. If everybody in the house here would put your phone on silent or stun, then it would make those in the middle of my talk or John's talk or something like that. It's the time of year when we are offering our mini grants again. So if you know anybody that's got a project, like a small restoration, something they're trying to paint where they could use about $1,000 and they think they could maybe do it between now and Labor Day. That's sort of what we orient our mini grants for. What am I hearing? Okay, I guess people are still putting their phones on stun, so, all right. Coming up on March the 12th, our meeting will be with Bill Jones as the presenter on Rio Grande narrow gauge consolidations. I don't have a show lined up for April 9th yet. The 19th of May, which is this year's week after Mother's Day, we're gonna have the club picnic out at the Railroad Museum. Last year, we had a light turnout because it was on Mother's Day, so that's not so great. And it seemed like everybody was pretty happy with the barbecue man that we had for our caterer.
Like that guy.
So I've talked to him and he thinks he can do it. He's had a minor heart attack, but he's back. It's gonna be good. So I will keep talking to him. We don't know what the prices will be yet, but he always does the best he can to keep the price as low as he can. Several years ago, we, as a club, had a tour out to Strasburg, Colorado, and Marlon Urich showed us around his shop where he builds small locomotives and does castings and stuff. One of the local PBS stations here in Denver had a special on him recently. I thought that was cool to give him a little shout out. Any other announcements from folks in here? Yeah, come on, because there might be people out there looking at you. Come stand right here.
If this is a repeat, stop me.
Okay.
I ran across an interesting book this summer that you all might be interested in. As you all know, there's a lot of literature on the Cumbres and Toltec from Antonito to Chama, a lot of literature on the Durango and Silverton. And I ran across this book called Tracking the Narrow Gauge from Chama to Durango. It's about 110-page paperback, and it covers the missing link mile by mile. And it's by a guy named Mike Butler, who many of you may know. He at one time belonged to this club, I guess before he moved to Durango. But I found it very interesting because it covers the missing link, so to speak, between the two cities. A lot of photographs before and present. He also covers which I wasn't even aware of, the probably 4 or 5 logging branch lines that came off the main line. And I thought it was interesting they call them branch lines. That was about 110-mile main line, and it's got 36-mile branch lines on it. They were all logging railroads. They were all under different names of the Rio Grande, but it seems that all of them were actually operated by the Rio Grande, and in some case purchased by the Rio Grande or owned by the Rio Grande. Also covers the Farmington branch, and for most of the route follows the main highways, but where it diverts from the main highways, he actually gives you county roads to take to get to some of these scenic areas. And also for some of the land that's now in private hands, he was able to get permission to take some photographs of some of the scenic things like a bridge or something like that. So I thought it was a really interesting book, easy to read, lots of photos, and found out the Denver Metro libraries all have interloaning agreements. So if your library don't have it, they can eventually get it for you. It's called Tracking the Narrow Gauge from Chama to Durango by Mike Butler. So any of you are interested, I thought it was pretty neat.
What year was it published?
Last year, 2023, it's a new book.
Mike Butler.
Mike Butler.
It's gotta be Bill.
Thanks. Any other announcements? I believe that the Winter Park Express, Amtrak's version of our snow train is doing well. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And yep, that goes till the end of March. And with that Amtrak connection, I'll bring up John Crisanti because he's kind of an Amtrak guy. So come on up, and this is our presenter for the evening, John Crisanti, and he will tell us what's up. So Have at it, sir.
So my name is John. I'm a Colorado native here. I was born and raised in Longmont and still live up there. 31 years tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
It's all good. But I've been pretty much a train nut all my life. My dad got me into it when I was 5 years old. He would always take me down to the old CNS depot down by the BNSF and wait for the train to show up. And then I didn't start getting into photography until about 2007 when I bought my first digital camera. It was just a small Sony point and shoot camera, and then eventually upgraded a few years later to a regular DSLR camera. And once I was able to start driving legally, then I was able to travel to where I wanted to go. But I mostly just grew up with the railroads up in northern Colorado, so just BNSF, Union Pacific, the Great Western, and just what like and any other the short lines that are in the area too. And like Dave said, I do have a connection with Amtrak. I'm the PM station agent at Union Station. So I handle the eastbound California stuff for 5 days a week. So if you're ever down at Union Station during the week, in the afternoon, you'll see me in the ticket office or out train side when the Zephyr's in. But other than that, I normally just do railroad photography, and I do a little model railroading on the side as well.
His models look great, just so you know. Yeah, well, tell us about your project and how long you've been working on it.
So
This way?
Podium, yeah, that's podium. It doesn't seem one of the right burn so.
Oh, here.
That's good. The camera's good.
all right, perfect. So, having lived 2 states over from Montana, I mean, I live being in the northern part of the state. It really wasn't that far to reach Montana. It's like maybe a 6 or 7 hour drive, so it wasn't too far. But it never occurred to me to actually go up and visit the Montana Rail Link, being how popular of a railroad it was for so many years. So when the announcement was made in January of 2022 that BNSF was going to be purchasing the lease from the Montana Rail Link, I decided like, oh, hey, I need to do a trip up there and actually document this railroad. So that way I actually have photos of my own of this. So 1 month after the announcement was made, me and a good friend of mine by the name of Kirk Orndorff, we took a trip up to Montana in the middle of February, but it wasn't too bad. And we decided to cover most of the railroad. So we started out in Billings and pretty much just worked our way west across the rail network for the next few days and got a lot of stuff. And on the trip back, I was thinking to myself, I feel like I should make a book about this because there's really not that many books out there regarding Montana Rail. Like there's a couple, but a lot of them they're outdated. They're back from the 90s. They don't include what the MRL is today with their change in motive power, their operations and stuff like that. So I decided later that year to take a second trip up on the summer, June, and to document more of the railroad. And just this last October, I made my final trip up before the MRL became part of the NSF network. So after about a year or two, I was finally able to publish my book, and I'm excited to share it with all you guys. What's on the presentation is just a short snippet, but I do have 4 copies here on the table that are available for purchase, where you can have a look through it. And you also have the option of buying the book directly through Amazon since it's through Kindle publishing. So they'll just print it and then ship it off to whichever address that you decided to put in there.
Hey, John, did you do the layout work too
Yeah,
in your book?
yep, all the cover designs, maps, grade charts, I fully did.
Nice work.
So,
Cool.
What, was this your first effort or is it?
no, this is my third book, because I did one back in 2016, just a short snippet about the Moffett line. Then I just did like a photo book of Colorado railroads about a year later. And then I had a pretty big lull until I decided that I wanted to do a brand new book. So this is 188 pages, hardcover, shows a lot of beautiful colored photographs with a lot of history, talking about how the MRL became a thing, like how the route was originally built by the Northern Pacific, then bleeding into the BN, and then how that got spun off into the MRL. And then pretty much just following the whole railroad across the network, and then closing it out with it being turned over to BNSF. So.
I guess we could do the show and he could take some questions after, if that works for you guys. Sure. Okay. Can I do what? Yeah. Yeah, Andy, are we gonna show on both screens, do you think?
It sounds like an almost, maybe it's the right degree, so.
Correct comment.
So mixing apples and normal computers is always a bad idea. That's what we have.
Or something. As long as he can hit.
I mean, once we start the show, I'll turn these lights off and you can stand there or wherever the remote control is to run your show.
I haven't found the remote control, so.
Well, should he just run it off the computer then?
Yes.
Yeah, because I'll turn this light off anyway, so.
Sounds like I just moved over to that table there.
No, I can bring another chair. Let's just do that.
Well, if the mic picks them up, okay, I guess.
Do we want that other monitor?
We're still working on that. Yeah, I don't know where the microphone is.
I think it's the round disc in the middle there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Camera is searching.
Keep
under that. Probably the best spot would be right where you were sitting. If we can bring the computer to him there, Andy.
Yeah, I think that might be easier.
And then you can see the big screen too, so. So we're kind of making this up as we go because we're still learning the room for sure.
No, I was talking about that other screen.
Yeah, I think we're gonna try. We're gonna try to get that. Do you want me to put a chair there for him to just run up the
Table might be easier.
Well, what I was trying to do is keep him close to the mic. We think that you should be able to hear it. If I put a chair in front of him, can you put it on that?
Yeah.
It's your. Okay. Do you need these? It's not just a job, it's an adventure.
Trial and error.
And there's several of these magazines from the Railroad Museum. You guys can take those if, so.
Oh, we got the other screen come up.
It was some button you pushed on. Or, I wonder if the gal who was from the house, if she pushed something on one of these too.
Well, I did something up here before.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
did.
he made it work.
You see okay, Frank?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Something changed. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep messing with it here. Or just start the show.
Okay. I'll shut the light off then.
Alrighty, so this is called Montana Rail Link. So I've already discussed who I am and my background and all that. And then pretty much explain why I chose to do a book about the rail. So a little brief history about the Montana Rail Link. It started out as the Northern Pacific when it was building its transcontinental railroad across the northern part of the United States, from a location near Superior in the Louvre. And then from the Pacific Northwest, their main goal, similar to the Great Northern and the Milwaukee Road, they wanted to connect to the Pacific Northwest. So the Northern Pacific completed its main line across Montana in 1883 with a golden spike ceremony, per se, at a location about 40 miles west of Helena. When you're traveling on Interstate 90 along both the Milwaukee and the MRL, you can actually see a sign off the highway to the left that signifies this is where the golden spike was commemorated in 1883. So for a while, there we go. And then pretty much that it was the Northern Pacific up until the merger with the Great Northern, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, the Spokane, Portland, and Seattle, which eventually became the Burlington Northern, and that got turned over. Well, as a result of that, Burlington Northern gained two transcontinental lines. They had the Northern Pacific down south, and then they also had the Great Northern route further north across Marias Pass. So in the late 70s, early 80s, the BN was in a state where they were starting to spin off some lines to different short lines or other railroads that they felt that they didn't need. But the biggest one would be the main line across the Northern Pacific main line across Montana between Billings and Sandpoint, Idaho. So a entrepreneur, businessman by the name of Dennis Washington, who at the time already owned a various amounts of mining, construction, and marine companies, stepped in and he started the Montana Rail Link, which became operational on October 31st of 1987. And immediately right after operations, the railroad started purchasing a lot of secondhand motive power from different railroads. So at that time, you were getting a lot of a variety in terms of paint schemes. You had Burlington Northern, Chicago Northwestern, New York Susquehanna, and a lot of different railroads at the time. But they were also starting to develop a paint scheme. And they decided to stick with what they stuck with all these years, the blue, white, and black. But they had different variations. They had different nose striping. They had different letter spacing until they came up with what the current scheme is now. And then and then a couple of times throughout the years, they modified their logo a bit. So one was what they called the Flying W, which was basically two slanted vertical lines to form a W for Washington Corporation. And then in the mid-90s, they they updated that logo to incorporate a so-called lion's head to present or to represent like power and leadership and all that. And that was the logo for, it still is the logo today for Washington Corps. And then in the recent years, they added a red dot in the logo, and that's what became the modern Montana Rail-Link logo up until the takeover last month. And for the most part of the railroad's existence, it was mostly just standard cab, second generation power. So you had your Jeep 9s, your SD9s, SD40s, SD45s, F45s. And then it wasn't up until 2005 when they purchased brand new power from EMD, the SD70 Aces like you see here. And their goal was to have higher horsepower and much more efficient and cleaner locomotives, mainly for the helper service, like you see here on Mullen Pass. And that became one of the main staples of the railroad up until the end. So the MRL, working from east to west, it officially began at Jones Junction, just east of Billings. Jones Junction is where BNSF's Forsyth subdivision from Glendive, Montana comes in. That's the original, still the original Northern Pacific main line from North Dakota and Minnesota. And a couple miles to the west of Jones Junction is Huntley, where the former Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy route from Gillette and Sheridan, Wyoming come up. And both routes are still relatively busy today. They see a lot of coal traffic from the Potter River Basin and either going to customers up in Minnesota, the Dakotas, or up into the Pacific Northwest and even up in Canada as well. And then from Huntley is Lockwood, which is right in the Billings area. And that's where most of the railroad's main customers are at. You're going to have your big petroleum refineries. So you're going to get a lot of LPG traffic and petroleum coke cars and other handful of industries. But the petroleum market was the railroad's biggest customer. And then moving into East Billings and in Billings, you enter their main yard there where they generate a lot of local traffic with the surrounding industries. And they also have a transfer run between their big yard in Laurel and Billings. So that way they can continue to feed cars in and out of the Billings area. And then working down towards Shiloh and Moss Main. Moss Main is where the Great Northern Route from Great Falls and Shelby comes in. And that today is BNSF's Laurel sub. That sees a fair amount of traffic since there's a relatively new coal mine up near Broadview. And that sees a fair amount of traffic onto the MRL going west. And then Laurel is the biggest yard. They do a lot of switching work and train building work, not only for them, but also for the BNSF as well. And then West Laurel is where the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy route from Casper and Grable through the Wind River Canyon comes up, and you'll get trains going west and east through there. You'll get trains terminating at Laurel Yard as well. So this is near downtown Billings. This is one of the yard jobs with one of their GP9s. This is the Northern Pacific Depot is actually right behind me here in the spot. And this is just a switch job going out with a cut of scrap cars and some tank cars going out to the refinery. And then this is just a little bit further west, maybe like a block or so away from where I was. And this is the eastern part of the yard in Billings. At one point, it was a pretty busy location because the BNSF in Burlington Northern at one time had a automotive and intermodal ramp that was pretty active there for a while, but that got shut down. I'm not sure how much or how long ago that was. But you can see just by looking at the eastern end of the yard there that most of the traffic is petroleum, both in tank cars and the coke that the refineries produce. So shifting further west, this is in Laurel. This is right along Main Street here, and this is one of the yard jobs going from the east end to the west end of your yard to work another set of cut of cars. And most of the yard jobs back there were mostly just rebuilt SD40s. At one point, it used to be the SW1200s, SW1500s that the railroad used to roster, but those ended up getting retired, and eventually they just assigned them to presently here the rebuilt SD40s. And then this is West Laurel. This is the junction where the Casper subdivision comes up. You can see the western leg of the Y right there in the foreground. And that train right there, that's a relatively new train that MRL started within the past couple of years. It's a local turn that operates between Laurel and Billings. It was a pretty consistent train to shoot. Always had a crew call at 4 p.m. Monday to Friday, and they were usually out of the yard within a half hour. And usually, like in the summertime, would be the best because you can chase it all the way to Bozeman and get it coming back, at least up Bozeman Pass on the return run. But this is in February, so very limited chase time with this. So this is the local leaving Laurel with passing by a BNSF grain train with a pair of CSX units on it. So that brings us to the second subdivision. The second sub traverses about 221 miles. It goes through a diverse collection of scenery. So leaving Laurel, it's pretty much fast running, and it parallels the Yellowstone River all the way up to Livingston. And Interstate 90 also parallels the railroad, I'd say 95% of the time, with frontage road access, very easy along most of the way. So it makes chasing a train along the stretch of railroad pretty easy, being that track speed's about 55 miles an hour. Centralized traffic control. And a lot of it was, at the time when I visited, it was still the Northern Pacific searchlight signals too, because PTC wasn't a thing on this railroad as well, up until as of recent. So, and then as you get further west, past Reed Point, up towards Big Timber, and then you start getting into more of the mountainous area, and then you can pretty much just follow the Yellowstone River through Kearney, Elton, and then as soon as you get, and then you're in a big valley up until you get to Livingston, and then boom, right there, there's the Bozeman Pass grade. So from Livingston, helpers will get added to most westbound trains. It's I believe it's a 1.8% grade, constant grade to the top. So westbound trains needing helper assistance will come into Livingston. The helper set will go to the east end of the yard. They'll get tacked on. Once everything's hooked up, air test, they'll depart and shove a train up the hill through Muir, and then detach there at the Bozeman Summit, right between, or right just east of West End. And then the helpers will run light power down to Livingston, either to assist another westbound up the grade, or if there's nothing coming for a while, they'll just go back to the yard office and tie up and wait for the next westbound. And usually they would have 2 helper sets available going up the grade. And then down from West End to Bozeman, it's a 1.9% grade downhill. And from Bozeman, it's pretty much fast running out to Logan, where the Homestake Pass line comes in, which is the railroad's 5th sub. And then branching off from Logan, the main line continues into Lombard Canyon following the start of the Missouri River. And then after Lombard, the railroad exits the canyon and goes into more of a valley type setting, pretty fast paced running. You have US Highway 287 that parallels the railroad from Toston pretty much all the way up to Helena. So it's pretty easy chasing. The railroad also encounters a slight grade over Winston Hill between Townsend and Louisville. And then East Helena is the junction where the 13th sub route or branch comes in from Montana City. That's actually former Great Northern. That was the former Great Northern line from Great Falls and went down to Butte, Montana. And then the division point at Helena. So this is another Laurel to Bozeman local going through the junction there at West Laurel. Power at the time of my first visit was usually an SD70 Ace and a SD40, but they threw in a second SD40 to either, so I think to Livingston for some reason. But yeah, and the train was pretty decent size too. There were a couple of instances where it was only maybe 7 cars long, but here it's still a pretty decent sized train for a local. And then this is the same local on a different day. This is west of Park City, Montana. And this is the town of Columbus. Like I said, the railroad follows the Yellowstone River for most of the way between Laurel and Livingston. So, and there's a decent amount of areas where you can get both the railroad and the river into your shots. And here it's pretty fast running too. It's about 50 or 55 mile an hour track speed. And then this is just right off the frontage road overlook. And then this is further west. This is between, I believe, Reed Point and the railroad siding of Quebec. And that's the Yellowstone River in the background, all frozen, middle of February. The second locomotive on the train is a special wrap locomotive. It's commemorating the veterans who served in all the military branches. So it features a American flag on the side and stars on both the side and the front of the cab. And then on the left, you can see frontage road, and then a little further back, Interstate 90. And then in the background above the locomotive is what is called the Crazy Mountains. So this is further west. This is a place called Big Timber, right off the interstate. This is the eastbound road train that MRL has operated for years. They call the eastbound trains called ML Missoula Laurel, and then the westbound trains called Elf Missoula. During this time, it was their standard power was always the SD70 Aces, and they pretty much just shuttled cars to the locals in Livingston, Bozeman, Logan, Helena, and then whatever is left that went to Missoula. So this is eastbound about late June. This is looking west towards the Crazy Mountains. So this is further west. This is near the railroad siding of Elton. This is, right along Yellowstone River. You can get a glimpse of the Crazy Mountains in the background. This is the westbound Laurel Bozeman local with only a few cars in tow and a pair of SD40s. Well, the first one's an SD40. The second motor is the railroad's only SD40-2. But this is right off the off-ramp from Interstate 90 to Frontage Road. So this is the east end of Livingston. This is where sometimes helpers will get added on to westbound trains if there's another one waiting in front of them as well. This is the eastbound ML train leaving Livingston after dropping off a locomotive in town there at the yard, and I think dropping off a couple of cars as well. So they're on the siding, and they'll soon be entering the main line and trekking off to Wall. So Livingston at one point was home to the Livingston Rebuild Center. It was part of the shop complex that is still there. It was a very busy place at one time. After the formation of the MRL, the Livingston Rebuild Center became a thing, and MRL did a lot of rebuilding work. At a short time, they even had leasing power as well. They had the reporting marks LRCX for Livingston Rebuild Center. That was a short stint for a while. But for years, not only MRL, but a lot of other railroads had their equipment sent to the shops here to get rebuilt or any repair work done. Even some paint work was done too. But though the Livingston Rebuild Center closed down, I want to say between 2000 and 2010, after going through a couple of different ownerships, including Talgo was one of them. But other than that, the actual shop complex itself is still up and running. It's MRL's main facility where locomotives go in for inspection work, repair work, stuff like that. So all the local power every Friday would get shuttled over from Bozeman and Logan and get dropped off here at Livingston to get inspection done over the weekend before going back to its normal weekday routines. And sometimes if locomotives had a 92-day inspection due, they'll be sent here and get that kind of work done. So this is one of the Livingston helper sets for Bozeman Pass. Like I mentioned before, if there's no westbounds waiting needing helpers, they'll take the lead in, or the west yard lead in, and go to the yard office and wait for the next westbound. And then here, a pair of SD70 Aces and the railroad's only SDP40, the scene coming into the yard. So this is on the grade west of Livingston. This is climbing up Bozeman Pass. This is the Laurel Bozeman local, running a notch 8 up to 1.8% grade in June 2022. So it was stellar summer lighting, all that. This is at a place called Hoppers. It's about, I'd say, a few miles just west of Livingston, right off of the frontage road and Interstate 90. And then this is a loaded BNSF coal train at the same spot. different day in the morning, slowly crawling up the grade at like 10 miles an hour with a helper set on the back. And this is one of the helper sets shoving a loaded ethanol train at the same spot, but looking in the opposite direction. So this is the top of Bozeman Pass. You can see where the grade starts cresting down, down to what will be a 1.9% grade. Originally, there's two tunnels there. The original one is right behind the train and a couple of pine trees, but if you walk further down, you can still see the original portal. But the train's coming out of the modern port, the more modern portal here. And then out of sight on the right is a sign that dictates this is where Lewis and Clark traveled over during their expedition over the Continental Divide. So down the pass in Bozeman, Bozeman is home to a pretty small yard, but it also stations a local that operates Monday through Friday. And that usually goes west to serve the industries out in Belgrade, Manhattan, and it also delivers cars to the local in Logan. And then on Thursdays, it would always take a trip up the pass to Livingston and down the old Yellowstone branch to serve a logging company as well. And that was only once a week. But here, the locals getting ready to depart west for Belgrade and Logan. And then in the background is a crane loading stick rail into a gondola car, since they were going to be doing some track work coming up. And then this is Manhattan. This is the eastern end of the siding at the time, still protected by the searchlight signals. This is just the BNSF auto-rack train that happened to have two MRL SD-70 locomotives along for the ride. I'm guessing they were picked up in Laurel and they're just being shuttled to either Helena or Missoula for whatever assignment they needed. And then you could also tell that they were going to be doing some new tie work coming up as well. So this is Logan. This is where the 5th subdivision or the Homestake Pass route comes in. This is the Logan local. Usually sports a Jeep 35 at a SD40 rebuilt. And it goes down and serves the industries between there and Whitehall, just east of Pipestone and Butte. But the main line itself diverts off to the right and will soon start paralleling the Missouri River and will continue to do so through Lombard Canyon up to Toston. And then this is Winston. That's another LM train. And they're coming into the siding here to meet a eastbound empty mega grain empty. The reason why they call them mega trains is they essentially combine two regular sized unit trains and put them together as one train. So when you hear axle counts up in the 900s or even thousands, then you got a mega train. And then this is the same train. It's coming down the grade from Louisville. You can see the western end of the siding in the background there with still protected by the searchlights. And then in several miles, the train will be in Helena. So at Helena being a crew change and a division point, this would be the third subdivision. And the third subdivision is the line that traverses Mullen Pass. So most, if not all, westbound trains will get helpers added on. So how it works is if there's a westbound getting ready to depart Helena, the helper set for that train will actually depart first and head out to Helena Junction, a few miles to the west of the yard. And Helena Junction is actually where the Great Northern Line from Great Falls comes in. It's still owned by BNSF, but unfortunately that line has been out of service for quite some time and has only been used for car storage. But for the time being, that's where the railroad would station their helpers that were waiting for the westbound needing assistance. So when the helpers are sitting on the Y there, the westbound will show up. And unlike the Bozeman helpers, the helpers here from Mullen actually get cut into the middle of the train. So half of the train will stop at the Y, go on hook the first half, pull forward, helpers will come out, hook on, then they'll back up to the second half, do their air test, and then start their assault on the hill right up towards Tobin. And then from there, you can follow the railroad up Austin Skyline Road. It's somewhat of a paved road, and then it becomes a dirt road, normally favorable during the summer, because in the winter it'll get snowed in just west of Austin, so you can't access Skyline Trestle and go over Bozeman Pass or go over Mullen Pass that way. During the winter, you would have to go down from Helena and take 287 and go out to where Elliston is, and then take Blocksburg Road east to the actual summit. So trains go through Austin and then loop through a series of horseshoes through what's called the Iron Ridge. And then from there, the railroad goes over two trestles, first one being Greenhorn Trestle, second one Skyline Trestle. And then eventually the train will reach the summit at Blocksburg. And then from there, trains will descend down the grade, but the helper's still intact, aiding for braking purposes. And then at Elliston, the helpers will get tacked off and then head east back to Helena for another westbound. And then it's pretty much fast running east or west of Elliston out to Garrison. And then Garrison is where the BNSF's Copper City subdivision from Butte comes up, but also the Milwaukee Road right-of-way from their Pacific Northwest expansion comes in, and that's when it starts to parallel the right-of-way pretty much all the way to Missoula. And then the railroad at that, there's really no frontage roads to get off that. It's pretty much all interstate highway at that point. So you'll just get off at certain exits to get some shots. But for the most part, it's just pretty much just fast running all the way out to Missoula. So this is where the helper sets are stationed at. They get serviced here. They'll get fueled, washed, and all that. So here, this is one of the helper sets leaving the facility, headed out to Helena Junction to wait for their westbound that they're going to assist up the hill to depart. And for many years, it was always SD45 locomotives, anything that had high horsepower to get the trains up to grade. And at one time, depending on the tonnage, they'll sometimes put helpers on the head end. Or if it was a coal train with the SD45s, they'll actually run two separate helper sets and cut in multiple spots on the train just because of the tonnage and the horsepower. But because here, these are rated at 4,300 horsepower each, you really only need um, form to assist a train over the grade. So this is just west of Helena Junction. The junction's right at the bottom of the hill there. There's a cantilever signal that protects the Y. And this is at Tobin where it becomes single track. This is a westbound BNSF manifest. Helpers are cut in towards the middle, right where the auto racks are in the background. This is just right before sunrise. So this is how the helper sets are configured on most westbound trains. This is MRL's LM train. They'll usually get tacked on into the middle. Then once everything's air tested and everything's a notch 8, crew could just sit back and hit the alerter button if needed up until they get close to the summit. And then once they get through the Mullen Pass tunnel, then they'll come out of power and then start going into dynamic braking down to Elliston. And this is just west of Tobin. This is along Austin Road. Westbound loaded BNSF grain train climbing the grade here, coming up to the east out of the siding at Austin. And this is one of the helper sets on a westbound manifest train. Typical fashion, cut in the middle. And in the background above the first helper locomotive, you could actually see an eastbound grain train waiting there for this westbound train to get to meet them so they can head down the hill to Helena. So this is Skyline Trestle. It's the second trestle climbing up the grade. It's much easily accessible versus Greenhorn. The Greenhorn's on some private ranch land of some sort, but this is right off of Austin Mullen Road. That takes you to the top of Mullen Pass. And this is a westbound BNSF manifest going over the trestle. And this is the summit of Mullen Pass. This is Blossburg. You can start to see the grade to level out there past the east switch. At one point, the tunnel itself was actually longer than what it is here, but the MRL was having issues with a lot of smoke buildup from the helpers with the new ACEs. So they actually had to cut the tunnel back a little bit further just to alleviate the smoke better when they were shoving trains up the grade and over the top. And then at this time, they were doing a lot of signal replacement work too. So you can see that the old searchlight signals were going to be soon replaced with the more modern tricolor signals. So this is just right around the curve from Blossburg. This is that's Blossburg Road on the side. It crosses the tracks right up there before the curve, and you can drive up to where the Y is and near where the tunnel is, and then the road splits off, and you'll have to go around and over the top to get to the east end of the pass. But this is the westbound LM train. With that veterans locomotive on the point. And you can see how I've mentioned that it's all the American flags on the side with the military branches below the radiator, and then the cab is completely covered in stars. So this was one of the like areas that they were doing signal work at the time. They contracted out the company Herzog to do their signal replacement. So I think not too long after I photographed this, the searchlight signals came down and the new signals were put in service. So this is Elliston. This is the daily process and how the helpers get removed. So every time a westbound train successfully gets down the grade, the train will pull past, the first half of the train will pull past the switch. The helpers will get tacked off and the helpers will then proceed into the siding. And then the westbound train will back up to its train, hook on, and then proceed west to Missoula. And then the helpers will head back east up the pass and then down to Helena to assist the next train over the hill. And then this is a Garrison. This is the LM train. They're going to be picking up some cars from the BNSF that they brought up from Butte. And in the background, you can actually see the tunnel for what was the Milwaukee Road alignment. A lot of the track is all gone, but you can still tell that where the railroad was based on the right of way. You can tell the track was there, tunnels. You can still see some telegraph code line. There's even I believe like a power substation still up just west of here that you can see right off the interstate. Yeah, it's quite amazing. Wish I got to experience having both railroads go through there when that was a thing. So this is further west. This is at a location called Bonita. And then to the left is the Milwaukee Road with another tunnel as well. This is the eastbound ML train. And then this is the yard in Missoula. Missoula is the origination point for the ML train, but it also houses the twice daily gas local train that serves the ConocoPhillips refinery out in Thompson Falls, out west along the Fort subdivision. And a lot of part of that country is on reservation land, so pipeline couldn't be constructed. So MRL stepped in the mid 90s and was like, hey, we'll transport the gas for you twice daily, 7 days a week. So say that not having a pipeline was a savior for having a reliable twice daily local. And it's still today operated, but it's under BNSF ownership. And then the train on the left here is a BNSF train getting its crew change and it's an inspection done before heading off to Spokane and eventually Seattle and Portland. So the Fort subdivision, it's essentially a river route. It's all fast running. There's really not that many grades to contend with. I mean, there's a couple, but for the most part, it's fast running all the way up into Sandpoint, Idaho. Track speed's about 55 miles an hour through the mountains there. So leaving Missoula, the railroad comes up to the location called the Smet. The Smet is where the 10th subdivision comes in. And at one point, that was the original Northern Pacific route when it was built. But it came at a price. The 10th subdivision has a ruling 2.2% grade on both sides. It's a short but a stiff grade. And the route between Missoula and St. Regis basically started out as a branch line and that eventually went west towards Idaho. And then eventually they constructed 30 miles of track between St. Regis and Paradise, and that essentially connected Missoula to Paradise with a much more lesser grade, faster route. Granted, it was 30 miles longer than the original, but you didn't have any grades to contend with. So it was mostly directional running. All your heavy trains would take the forts up out of Missoula and head up towards St. Regis and out to Paradise. And then all your lighter eastbound trains will take the 10th sub at Paradise and then go over Evero Hill and then down towards the Smet. The gas local that I mentioned earlier would normally take the 10th sub in both directions. And the gas train going west out of Missoula is always loaded. So they're going to be working up the 2.2% grade out of the Smet up to Evero, and then coming eastbound, it's empty, fast running. And from Paradise, the railroad follows the Clark Fork River pretty much all the way into Idaho, through Eddy, Thompson Falls, Trout Creek, Noxon, and then into Idaho. And the railroad eventually meets with Lake Penderel out by Hope. And then the railroad eventually connects with the Northern Transcontinental Line from Whitefish and down to Spokane. So this is what they call the night gas local. Crew goes on duty every day at 4 p.m. out of Missoula, and they're usually out of the yard within a half hour. Power for this normally has been ST-70 Aces. Here they're coming up to the Smet, and the 10th subdivision, being it's non-signaled except for one siding, requires track warrants. So before they enter the 10th sub, they'll dial up the dispatcher and ask for a track warrant before they get up to the 10th sub. Now, sometimes if there's a lot of eastbounds coming on the 10th sub, they'll run the gas local up and along the 4th sub, just so that way they don't have to play cat and mouse with any eastbound traffic going up the hill. So this is one of the sidings further west called Lothrop. This is just an eastbound BNSF train meeting a westbound loaded grain train. So this is west of St. Regis. This is along the Clark Fork River. This is the night gas local, sprinting along at track speed, 50 miles an hour. This is right off the state highway there, right along the Clark Fork River. This is just west of the railroad siding called Tool. And this is a little bit further west. This is at a location called Don Lane. And this part of the railroad essentially goes in a straight line while the highway pretty much follows the banks of the river. And the river curves a lot, but the railroad just goes straight. So in this section, you have the river crossing the river 3 times in less than a mile. So you have all these neat bridges that can be photographed of trains going over it. And it makes chasing tough because we got the railroad going straight, trains doing 50 miles an hour, but you're doing 65 on the highway and you're curving a lot and away from the track. So it makes chasing very difficult. So, and then this is west of Paradise and at a place called Plains, right off the state highway. They're one of the most well-known photo locations on that part of the MRL system. This is the day gas local coming back from Thompson Falls along the Clark Fork River. And west of Thompson Falls, the railroad is pretty much if you want to call it a superhighway. Trains pretty much go track speed, makes chasing difficult. It's a very well engineered route. Just lots of bridges, really no curvature and no mountain grades. But this is one of like the most common scenes that you'll find west of Thompson Falls. And this is just west of a location called Tuscarora. This is a eastbound merchandise train going over one of the inlets there from Knoxon Reservoir. So this is in Idaho. Lake Pandarel is right behind me here. This is well after sunset. This is one of the Northern Pacific cantilever signals still protecting the east end of the siding in the town of called Hope. It was a very busy evening too. They had, I believe, 5 or 6 eastbound trains back to back. It was during the grain rush too, so you had all these grain trains as well. So I was hoping this would be a sunny late afternoon shot, but being tied up with all the eastbound traffic, I had to do with this, but I'm glad I was able to get something out of it. So where the railroad comes in at Sandpoint is right next to the Northern Pacific Depot, which is now which now sees the Amtrak Empire Builder service daily. It's not a staff station, but it's still a beautiful station nonetheless. And recently, BNSF double tracked this part of the railroad through here just to ease any congestion. And that also includes the big bridge across Lake Pandarel, right behind me by a couple miles. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of the depot is where the junction with the MRL comes in. So trains going to or from go through here. So the 5th subdivision, it starts in Logan, and it's basically the Northern Pacific route that went over Homestake Pass and eventually out to Butte. So at one point, it did see the North Coast trains, both the BN and then the Northern Pacific trains, and then Amtrak made a brief appearance up until, I believe, 1978 or 1979 for a while. And then Homestake Pass closed down, I believe, in 1980 or 1981. And it's still owned by BNSF to this day. But the reason why that the route is still intact and not abandoned is there's a old clause somewhere stating that if the railroad was to abandon the route over Homestake, they would have to completely restore the landscape back to what it used to be, which would cost a lot of money, being that a lot of the right of way has a lot of mine shillings. So that would be a complete nightmare to try and remove all that and restore everything back to what it used to be before the railroad existed. So for now, the railroad just sits there dormant. There's been rumors stating that with the BNSF takeover, that they'll rebuild the line and do directional running for eastbound lighter trains, because it still poses the same grade as Mullen Pass, but it just has a lot of severe curvature. And the right of way needs a lot of work and rehabilitation done. So personally, I don't see that route being a thing, but as long as the rails are still in there, anything is possible. So the fifth sub continuing west goes down to Three Forks. And Three Forks is where Three Rivers comes in, and that's where the Missouri River actually begins. And this is also where the Milwaukee Road from Lombard and Hallerton, Montana come in, and it begins to, they had their own yard there at once, and they pretty much paralleled the Northern Pacific through Willow Creek and then down to Sappington. And then from Sappington, they can parallel each other along the Jefferson River through Jefferson River Canyon, and then just west of the canyon there, just east of Whitehall, the railroad split up. The Northern Pacific went its own way through Whitehall, while the Milwaukee Road went its own way over Pipestone Pass and eventually up to Butte. But for now, the Montana Railing basically runs a local daily during the week. It serves the industries at Three Forks, Willow Creek, Sappington, and then there's a short branch that diverts off there at Sappington and goes down to Harrison. I think that's a 1 or 2 day a week type of operation. And then the local goes out to Whitehall. And then out by Pipestone and Spire Rock is a rock loading facility. So a lot of ballast trains get loaded there, not only for the MRL, but BNSF. So you would also get a little bit of ballast train action as well on top of the locals. But during my visits up there, I didn't see any ballast trains, just the local that goes through there. So this is the Logan local. This is coming around the curve, coming up to Three Forks. The Milwaukee Road is right away is to the left out of the frame. And here the railroad will soon cross under Interstate 90 before going into town. And this is Willow Creek. This is the eastbound Logan local returning back after picking up a couple of boxcars back there at the facility, and then a hopper car from Whitehall. And this is pretty much being all jointed. Rail track speed was 40 or 45 miles an hour, so it was fun to hear the classic clickety clack sound going at a pretty good clip over jointed rail. So this is the eastern part of Jefferson Canyon, and then that's the Jefferson River right there. And then right across the river is the Milwaukee Road right of way as well. And I've seen some photographs of both railroads in the canyon there. So I've seen photos of Milwaukee trains there, but I've also seen photos of Milwaukee trains being rerouted over the Northern Pacific through that same canyon as well, including Amtrak as well. So this is the western edge of Jefferson Canyon. It's a short but a really scenic canyon. The road pretty much parallels the tracks the whole way through the canyon, so shots are easily accessible here. Then right across the river, you can sort of see where the Milwaukee Road is. You can also see a piece of a cold line pole still standing right in between the mountain and that big tall pine tree as well. And then, so the next subdivision's the 10th sub. Like I mentioned earlier, it was the original main line when the Northern Pacific was built across Montana. But the railroad was plagued with a 2.2% grade on each side of Evero. But after Evero was pretty much just fast running along the highway there and up until Raleigh and Dixon, and then up around Perma, the Flathead River came in, and the railroad would follow the Flathead River all the way to Paradise. And this is the night gas local. He's working up the 2.2% grade. This is just west of De Smet, just outside of Missoula. And then this is the summit of Evero Hill. This is the eastbound empty day gas local coming back from Thompson Falls. And then this is further west near the railroad location in the small community of Perma. And that's the Flathead River in the background. And then this is the junction with the 10th sub and the 4th sub. The 4th sub comes in on the left, and the day gas local here is seen entering the 10th sub. And the biggest difference is the 10th sub still is an all jointed rail as well, but you'll still get the regular mainline traffic from BNSF as well that uses it for quicker, faster way to get to Missoula. And in the background is the small yard that they have there as well. And this is also a milepost change as well. So on the left with the 4th sub, you can see that it has a milepost of 219. That's counting up from Helena. And then right at the junction here, it resets to 0. And on the right, it shows milepost 64, and that's counting up from Missoula. So from Paradise to Sandpoint, it starts up again at 0, and then it counts up going west. And then the last subdivision is the 13th sub. It's a very short piece of railroad. It's under 5 miles long. But this is the only Montana rail link route that wasn't part of Northern Pacific. It's the old Great Northern Line that came down from Great Falls, went through Helena, and then down towards the Butte. So part of that, you could still find a lot of areas of that right of way still in existence. There's a couple of tunnels, and I think there's a trestle left somewhere south of Montana City off the beaten path, but it's still there if you know where to look. But the only customer that's on this route, as far as I know, is a big cement plant located at Montana City. That gets served 5 days a week with both coal and cement cars. And that local's usually powered with a GP9 and an SD40. So this is the Helena local with a Jeep 9 and an SD40-2 with a cut of loaded coal hoppers. They're seen leaving East Helena, headed down to Montana City. And this is a little bit further east of the previous location. That's the same local coming back with a cut of empty coal hoppers. And then this is the big cement plant that the railroad serves. It's a pretty big facility, sees a lot of car traffic. There's always a big line of cement cars and coal hoppers that are either waiting to be spotted or picked up and get the inbounds and outbounds switched out. And then here is another GP9, and then second motor at the present time was the railroad's only active SD45. So after the takeover on January 1st, there was a lot of speculation on what's going to happen with all the MRL power. Is it going to be kept by BNSF? Is it going to be sold off? And all that. So as of within the past couple of weeks, one of the MRL SD78s ended up on a BNSF train that was traveling to Kansas City, Kansas. So that ended up in Kansas City, and then it came back north on another merchandise train to Lincoln, Nebraska. And then within the past week or so, the locomotive got tacked onto a fracking sand train in Lincoln, and the train happened to be bound for Fort Collins and Windsor. So word definitely got out that MRL 4307 got put on a BNSF sand train headed for Colorado as the last DPU locomotive on the train. So it was facing out, so it made for good going away shots. So last week, the sand train came up out of Denver. During the day, myself, Damon here, and several other rail fans were out shooting this. Being the word on the street was that these older SD70 Aces were going to be put up for sale, being that they can't lead due to not having an isolated cab. And they're much, and being that they're much older locomotives. So a lot of us went out to photograph what could probably be the last time we see an MRL locomotive, not only outside of Montana, but for good. So the train came up the Front Range subdivision to Fort Collins, and then the next day, the Great Western Railway crew picked up the train and took the train out to Windsor to be unloaded at Halliburton. And then the train finally got unloaded like last Friday or Saturday. And let's see, the train was actually going back to Fort Collins tonight with this same power on it. So I'm not sure when exactly it left Windsor, headed back to Fort Collins, but I'm pretty sure it's there by now. So this is the loaded sand train leaving, going through Fort Collins on the Great Western track. So this was out in down in Broomfield. This is that loaded sand train coming up with the MRL unit on the rear. They just got done meeting an intermodal train and the local as well. So they are seen stopped here. Conductor's going to get out, throw the switch so they can leave the siding and head up to Fort Collins. And that's Mount Meeker in the background. And this is further west, just west of the siding there in Broomfield. I actually did catch this particular locomotive a couple of times on one of the helper sets on Mullen Pass a couple summers ago. So this was the next day. They got a Great Western crew for it to take it to Windsor. Myself and about a dozen other rail fans are out chasing this. So this is at North Yard in Fort Collins. The crew's on board. They're getting ready to leave and head out to Windsor. And this is just a wider shot of the previous Fort Collins photo. And this is further east. This is in the community of Timnath, between Fort Collins and Windsor. And then this is actually in the town of Windsor. The OMLX 408 is one of two SD45 car bodies that are currently in use on the Great Western. This one has a Southern Pacific heritage. It was originally built as SP 9144 before getting turned into an SD45R during the late 80s, early 90s, and getting renumbered and repainted into the speed lettering. And then it eventually became, went over to Citibank Financial and became under the ownership of CEFX before going over to Omnitrix. But this is the sand train coming into Windsor, and then further east, they'll get off the main and go into the facility and balloon track to get unloaded. And with that, you can take a look at my book. I have 4 copies on the table. If you wish to purchase them, come and see me. I'm only doing card at the moment. But if you wish to purchase a book, you can do it directly through Amazon. Or if you wish to wait, I'll be selling it at the Rocky Mountain Train Show in April.
You want to take some questions, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody in the house have questions for John?
Does your book have all those division points and explain all that there?
Yes, it does.
Cool. That's a lot of graphic work.
What weight of rail is most of this on the main line up in Montana?
I'd say 115, 136 pound rail. I'd say mostly 136 pounds because they're dealing with heavy coal trains, grain traffic. So it needs to be all modernized.
It's all welded.
Yeah, with the exception of the 10th subdivision and the 5th sub, that's still jointed rail. The rest of the main line's all heavy welded rail.
Do you have any idea where the coal trains or where they originated and where they were headed?
A lot of the coal traffic, they either came from that new coal mine north of Laurel, while the rest usually come up from the Potter River Basin, usually south of Gillette or near Sheridan. And then most of them were headed up to either Washington State or Robert Banks, British Columbia, over the border.
Export, huh?
John, that Livingston Rebuild Center, was it originally owned by Washington and then subleased? And now back to his property?
So I think the Livingston Rebuild Center, it was obviously Northern Pacific, then BN, and then once it became MRL, it was under Washington Corp. So he did own the shops themselves. It was just under a subsidiary name, if you want to call it that. But then the shops themselves were still owned and operated by the MRL until the takeover.
Okay. Any plan for him to maintain them or continue with them?
It sounds like it because they did close down their maintenance facility in Inner Bay, Washington. So I suspect that they want to keep Livingston up and running. Because I think the nearest work facility is up in Havre, and then Glendive.
You live up north, so what happened to the Great Western last week that ended up on the ground?
Do you need better track?
Better track.
You need better track.
So it's just split the rail, or I mean,
I'm not sure what exactly happened because it happened right there in the yard in Loveland, which of course is not the greatest track in the world either.
Oh,
Well, they moved the equipment out of there very quickly because I went
yes.
the next morning. It was gone. I don't know where the locomotives went. The grain cars that were damaged, I don't know where they went.
It was probably hid somewhere in the yard there because it was right by the yard.
No, I checked the yard. There was nothing there. It was gone. They still had some of the rest of the train tied down on the other side of the junction, but everything else was gone. I don't know what they did with it.
They were probably good at hiding it somehow.
Yep.
Unless they put it, yeah, they could have put it in one of the buildings there, but
Yeah, it's
I sure
possible.
didn't see it.
Any other questions in here? One in the back.
I was wondering on the 1883 Golden Spike there that you were talking about, was that the completion of the line from where to?
Yeah, so it was the completion of the Northern Pacific route between Minnesota and the Pacific Northwest. They actually had to take a golden spike from somewhere up in Minnesota and bring that in to do the commemoration of it in 1883.
Oh, okay. Cool.
John was telling me earlier, you don't have to do much hiking to get a lot of these shots. He said almost everything.
Yeah, a lot
is
of like
close to a road.
all these shots, I didn't have to do any hiking. I was literally standing right next to my car off the shoulder of the road. So that's one of the major perks of the MRL is you don't really need to hike anywhere. You just, a lot of it is publicly accessed off of either the highway or a frontage road of some sort.
Didn't,
Hi, can you hear me from Zoom?
Yep, we
Yep.
can.
Yeah, what camera do you use?
I use the Canon 5D Mark III. It's a full frame DSLR camera.
Have you been using that for a while or for this book in particular?
I mean, I've used it for the past few years now. So even way before I even published this book.
Now that.
Great pictures. You're really lucky with some of those skies that you got. I love that, when you get the dark sky, even though it's sunny, that's really, you get the contrast. Did you post process these pictures, or they're pretty much what comes out of the camera?
I mean, it's just your basic post processing. So just cropping, sharpening, kind of like what you would do in a darkroom. Maybe adjust the contrast a little bit, but other than that, it's pretty much almost straight out of the camera.
Great stuff. Thanks.
Yeah.
From the Zoom, great stuff there. One thing for anybody that goes up there along the 10th sub, when you get over Evero Hill along the river, watch out for timber rattlers and rattlesnakes. They're along the river there, the river banks, there's lots of them. So be careful in the season.
Now that it's part of Burlington Northern Santa Fe, will they divert some of the traffic that used to go across the north down
Got on the MRO.
yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. Since January 1st, they've been operating under still MRL rules and their timetable, but in 2 days, that'll actually transition over to BNSF rules and all that. So I'm not 100% sure what exactly their plan is. I know the helper sets up there did get changed. The Bozeman pass helpers are now BNSF SD70 MAC locomotives. And then all the newer SD70 ACE locomotives got shifted over to Helena to be used over Mullen Pass. As for the older SD70 ACE locomotives, they could go anywhere at this point. Like you saw here, one ended up in Colorado, this past week. And the older powers for the time being is still on the locals, so you still got the GP9s, you still got the Jeep 35s and whatnot still on the locals up there, but after February 15th, it's all fair game at that point.
How about they?
Yep.
Do we have any more questions on the Zoom from people from far away?
Yeah.
All right, Andy, the stuff you put on the back table is kind of open.
That's great.
You put some maps and whatnot back there, and I've got some magazines from the River Road Museum. Those are up for grabs if anybody wants one. You don't have to put your chairs away this time. So for everybody here and far away, thanks for putting up with our sound issues. I'm sure it wasn't the greatest to hear, but we kind of made the best of what we could. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Joan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I guess we will see you in March.